Alert now, and after weeks of delays from Democrats, President Trump finally has his man. Jeff Sessions will be sworn in as the next Attorney General. A bit later this morning, the president will be there as we say good morning on a snowy day here in the Northeast. I'm Bill Hemmer. Here we go on a Thursday in America's Newsroom.
Yes,
and Heather, welcome back to you.
Nice to be here. Doing really good. I'm Heather Childers in for Shannon Bream. Well, Jeff Sessions, he was arguably the most controversial pick for the Democrats. Opposing senators staging another all-night talkathon ahead of last night's confirmation vote, which went nearly along party lines. Mr. Sessions winning confirmation with every Republican vote, plus one Democrat. And he thanked them for their support.
Reconciliation is important. We ought to do that in this body. I would say that would be my prayer for this body, that in the future maybe the intensity of the last few weeks would die down and maybe somehow we get along better. So, colleagues, I can't express how appreciative I am for those of you who stood by me during this difficult time.
Then it will be official a bit later. In the meantime, Joe Manchin, the Democrat from West Virginia, did vote for Sessions. Now the battle shifts to Tom Price. The Senate voting last night to move ahead on President Trump's nominee for Health and Human Services Secretary. A final vote could come late tonight or early tomorrow morning on Price.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts begins our coverage this morning. John, more on the president's cabinet in just a second. But first, Mr. Trump sounding off on a Democratic senator. Who is that?
Heather, good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. We're already out of breath covering the White House. The president going off on Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal on Twitter, writing, quote, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who never fought in Vietnam, what he said for years he had, major lie, now misrepresents what Judge Gorsuch told him. Here's the background to all of this. Judge Gorsuch, the president's nominee for the Supreme Court, met with Blumenthal yesterday. Blumenthal asked him about the attacks on the judiciary that we've been hearing over the past few days. Here's what Blumenthal said to the press after that meeting. Listen.
My strong hope is that he will be more vehement publicly. He certainly expressed to me that he is disheartened by the demoralizing and abhorrent comments made by President Trump about the judiciary.
Now then, I'm told by a source who was with Gorsuch that while the judge said attacks on the judiciary are, quote, disheartening and demoralizing, he never said the words abhorrent comments by President Trump, and that he only spoke in generalities about attacks on members of the judiciary and did not speak specifically to what the president said about District Judge James Robart or the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals hearing. Former Senator Kelly Ayotte, who was shepherding Gorsuch through all of these meetings up on Capitol Hill, backed that up in a statement saying, quote, Judge Gorsuch has made it very clear in all of his discussions with senators, including Senator Blumenthal, that he could not comment on any specific cases and that judicial ethics prevent him from commenting on political matters. While he made it clear that he was not referring to any specific case, he said that he finds any criticism of a judge's integrity and independence disheartening and demoralizing. Now, with all of that out there, we're also expecting that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals could come down with a ruling, Heather, as early today on whether or not they will lift the temporary restraining order on the president's extreme vetting executive order. And it's only 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, unreal. But one more thing. Jeff Sessions, he is in. What is next for him?
Yeah, well, Sessions was confirmed last night, as you mentioned at the top. The president very happy about all of this, sending out a congratulatory postcard to the senator via Twitter saying, quote, congratulations to our new Attorney General, Senator Sessions. Now the big push is aimed at Tom Price to be confirmed for HHS Secretary. The president cannot move ahead in his plan to repeal and replace Obamacare unless Congressman Price is in place. Democrats know that, which is one of the reasons why they've been slowing his confirmation process down. As Bill pointed out at the top, he made it through the committee yesterday, will likely be confirmed in a vote tomorrow. Here's the scorecard as far as confirmations go. Donald Trump, President Trump, has got 6 of his 15 so far at this point. President Obama had 12 of 15, George W. Bush had 14 of 14, and Bill Clinton had 13 of 14. And one other thing to talk about this morning, the president also lashing out at Senator John McCain about what McCain said regarding the raid in Yemen that took the life of Navy SEAL Ryan Owens about a week and a half ago. Senator McCain saying you can't consider this to be a success because of the loss of life. President Trump going off on him in a tweet storm this morning saying, quote, Senator McCain should not be talking about the success or failure of a mission to the media, only emboldens the enemy. He's been losing so long, he doesn't know how to win anymore. Just look at the mess our country is in, bogged down in conflict all over the place. Our hero Ryan died on a winning mission, according to General Mattis, not a failure. Time for the U.S. to get smart and start winning again. And in just a few minutes, even though everybody's having their flights canceled across the Northeast, the CEOs of all the major airlines will be here at the White House to talk to the president about creating jobs.
That is somewhat ironic with, I think, about 5,000 flights canceled across the country. John, thank you.
We could do this whole show from the north lawn of the White House. I mean, Roberts has a ton today. All right, Alabama's governor, just about an hour ago, naming the replacement for Jeff Sessions in the U.S. Senate, tapping current Alabama State AG Luther Strange to fill the seat until a special election is held in November next year. Strange has served as Alabama's AG since the year 2010, going back 7 years on that. Okay, now, analysis with Guy Benson, political editor, townhall.com, and a Fox News contributor. And Guy, good morning to you.
Morning.
Whew, you have to exhale after all that. Let's start with Judge Gorsuch. What do you believe based on a statement from Senator Ayotte earlier today, based on the comments on behalf of Senator Blumenthal, based on the tweet from President Trump? How are we to piece this together and figure out what the truth is?
Well, I like the fact that President Trump came after Blumenthal the way that he did on the Vietnam piece, because, you know, when you lie about serving in a war, that's about as low as it gets, I think. So it's a relevant attack from Trump, who's sort of defending his honor a little bit here and going after the dishonor of Blumenthal. But the fact is, Blumenthal's account of what happened seems to be backed up by Kelly Ayotte, and for what I'm reading this morning, a couple Republican senators as well. So I think that it's probably true that Judge Gorsuch defended the judiciary, which is his job. He believes in the Constitution. He believes in the separation of powers. He's not being disloyal to President Trump by making this statement. He's being loyal to the document that he's going to interpret and uphold as a Supreme Court justice.
And we're hoping to get Senator Ayotte on here this hour, in fact, so stay tuned for more on that. Now the politics of race. Wow. The Senator Sessions battle. You have the Elizabeth Warren dust-up from the other night, pulled from the floor of the Senate. And then you have Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece saying this with Neil Cavuto yesterday.
I believe certainly that if she could look at the record of Senator Sessions today with integrity, she would say, well, he has worked to prosecute the Ku Klux Klan. He has worked to desegregate public schools. So it's almost like a bait and switch. Stir up the emotions, use the name of King, and my name is Alveda King. Stir up people's emotions, play the race card.
Very powerful comments there. Okay, now Sessions, is he bruised through this, or does he recover?
I think he recovers because every nominee has been bruised for the most part. You just ran through the scorecard, or John Roberts did, of how few of President Trump's picks have gone through compared to previous presidents. The Democrats have a base that is furious at the election of Donald Trump. They are insisting at tooth and nail fighting every step of the way, which is why we've seen back-to-back all-night talkathons against Betsy DeVos and then Jeff Sessions. The Democrats are playing to their base, doing what they need to do politically, and I think in some cases dragging some good names through the mud, or at least being unfair and ratcheting up the rhetoric. But, hey, that's 2017 politics.
Well, Guy, thank you for that. Guy Benson there, analysis in Washington, D.C. Good to have you on today. Thanks.
From one storm to another, the Northeast getting slammed with a massive snowstorm right now. It is expected to drop more than a foot of snow in some places. That means millions of people will be impacted. The system prompting hundreds of school cancellations as communities brace for some whiteout, or at least near whiteout conditions. Here's what it looks like in Times Square. Take a look. The National Weather Service urging New Yorkers stay off the roads. That is why. And this is outside our building right here. Hard to believe. Yesterday, it was in the 60s here. Bill, really unbelievable. And they're saying that one of the issues is the snow will come down so fast, 3 to 4 inches in an hour, at one point they were saying.
Yeah, and it'll be all melted by this time tomorrow, likely here in New York.
But not before we get in a snowball fight.
Moving quick, well, that's right. We have that strategized, don't we? It's moving quickly, so I mean, this thing's going to come and go. But for now, right now, the kids are off school. You know, they canceled school in New York here
yesterday
for high winds 2 weeks ago. I mean, find an excuse. We'll come up with it. Okay, right now the tension mounting in the U.S. and around the world as we wait for that decision for the Ninth Circuit. That three-judge appellate court among the more liberal benches in the country. Will their decision be rooted in law or in politics? The judge is going to make a case on that today. Plus, there's this. Watch.
An unelected judge does not have the right to remake the immigration laws and policies for the entire United States of America. This power is vested in the president.
The White House insisting that the president was well within his constitutional rights to issue the temporary ban, and now ripping into the media for dishonest coverage.
Also, this immigration. This is an immigration standoff in Arizona. Protesters physically preventing federal agents from doing their jobs over fears that a woman out of Mexico may face deportation. More on this story in a moment here.
I'm pretty nervous, but I'm trying to stay strong and positive. We're out here with our community trying to stop this van from leaving. It's hard not to cry, but we have to stay strong. I told her that I love her and that everything's going to be okay.
Welcome back. Protests erupting in Phoenix over the arrest of an illegal immigrant.
What are you doing?
Here's what's happening. This is video of protesters blocking an ICE van as agents tried transporting a 36-year-old woman to the immigration offices. Well, she was going in for what is a 6-month checkup. That's a policy under the Obama administration. But instead of being released, she was detained under President Trump's illegal immigration crackdown. 7 protesters arrested. We'll have more ahead with this live story coming up.
I don't ever want to call a court biased, so I won't call it biased. And we haven't had a decision yet. But courts seem to be so political, and it would be so great for our justice system if they would be able to read a statement and do what's right. And that has to do with the security of our country, which is so important. Right now, we are at risk because of what happened.
President Trump yesterday. Some comments about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals as we await a decision on the controversial travel ban. I want to bring in Ken Cuccinelli, former VA Attorney General in Virginia, president of the Senate Conservatives Fund. How you doing, sir? And good morning.
Bill, I'm doing well.
Good morning to you. When do you think that decision comes, by the way? What's your feeling on that?
My guess is probably the end of the day today. The court is very sensitive to the need for speed. This is an appeal of a temporary restraining order, which is a lightning order. It was so fast that the original judge did not issue an opinion explaining his ruling, which is, given the extremeness of the ruling, was decidedly unprofessional from a judicial standpoint. Nonetheless, this appellate court, I think, feels the same need for speed, and so I think you'll probably see a ruling today. They said in the oral argument that they would rule this week, so obviously if it's not today, it'll be tomorrow.
I want to play for you a little bit from the case the other night, okay, folks?
Sure.
Let's cue up the second soundbite here, not the first one. Go to the second one. This is the attorney for the state of Washington, all right? This is the case he's making now before the panel of judges. Listen here.
We detailed a number of irreparable harms, Your Honor. We had students and faculty at our state universities who were stranded overseas. We had families that were separated. We had longtime residents who could not travel overseas to visit their families without knowing that they would be able to come back. We had lost tax revenue.
Okay, there are 3 things he listed in that statement. Does any of that qualify under the statute?
None of it qualifies under either the statute. And understand this, when a state sues the federal government, as Washington is doing, the first big challenge they have is proving that the state itself is harmed. Everything you heard the Solicitor General of Washington State reference there were harms to individuals in their state. They have their own standing to sue, except for the tax revenue, and tax revenue has never been a basis for state standing. So one of the big hurdles the state of Washington has is just proving they're harmed at all. States don't have a role in national security legal decisions, and that's what President Trump is
very interesting. I heard the administration make three cases. The risk is real with regard to national security. The order is temporary, 90 days, 120 days, depending on to whom it affects. And the green card carrier order has been amended.
Right, they clarified that.
So even if these justices in San Francisco see it that way, there's going to be another challenge. So if that's the case...
Well, Bill, there's actually already been another challenge.
But it just continues then, and I think ultimately it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Sure it does.
Do you see it that way or not?
Yeah, yes, I do. The only question is the path and speed, and is it allowed to take place beforehand? And one thing that isn't being talked about enough is, look, in our system of government, there is nothing that is so completely deposited in the executive branch's power as national security. And if you read the law, you know, President Trump was right in his comments about how obvious the statement of the law is. It says any classification at the discretion of the president. This is completely deposited within his executive authority as president. And the courts here are violating the separation of powers with this injunction. It's a very serious situation. If I were in the Trump team, if I were in the White House, obviously if I win today, I just go back to the district court and present my evidence and plow through.
Gotcha.
But if I lose, I probably pull the order, rewrite it, and start over, and immediately get a ban back in place.
I just want to squeeze this in quickly. You've mentioned the speed a couple of times here now. How would the U.S. Supreme Court respond to the level of urgency that you're expressing here? And well, the administration feels that also.
Right, but, you know, short of death penalty cases where somebody is literally about to be executed, the Supreme Court is what you and I think of as speed is not in the same category as the Supreme Court. They would take longer.
Thank you for your time. Ken Cuccinelli.
Absolutely.
Out of Washington today, thank you. 20 minutes past the hour now. Heather.
We have some breaking details on an ISIS terror plot thwarted. 4 people now in custody. Police say that it could have been a huge attack, but we'll tell you how they stopped it from happening.
Also, our nation's top military brass sounding the alarm, saying that our fighting force has declined to the point of a crisis. We'll look at the numbers, figure out whether or not they're saying is right and what they mean for this campaign promise from President Trump in April.
We're going to build our military bigger, better, stronger than ever before. Nobody is going to mess with us. That I can tell you.
There are more concerns. Spread of ISIS overseas now from earlier today. Turkey arresting 4 ISIS suspects said to be plotting to carry out a, quote, sensational attack. Detained in a town near the Syrian border. Police finding 24 suicide attack belts, explosives, 2 automatic rifles, among other items there. This comes only days after hundreds of suspects believed to be linked to ISIS were detained in raids across Turkey. CIA Director Mike Pompeo also arriving in Turkey today to talk about the fight against ISIS with officials in that country.
The history of failure in war can be summed up in 2 words. Too late. Too late to comprehend the deadly purpose of the potential enemy. Too late in realizing the mortal danger. Too late in preparedness. Distinguished members of the subcommittee, preparedness or readiness cannot be overlooked.
A U.S. Air Force official quoting General Douglas MacArthur while sounding the alarm on Capitol Hill, saying that our military is falling increasingly behind in being ready for combat operations. Let's bring in Pete Hegseth. He's a veteran of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and, of course, a Fox News contributor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So I was reading through some of the other things that some of the vice chiefs had to say. Another one used the words insidious decline. Also went on to say that while we're able to put our first team on the field, our backups are sadly depleted. How do we get to this point?
We got to this point because of 8 years of the Barack Obama administration where our military was sadly underfunded and underprioritized. The Budget Control Act, which emanated from the White House in 2011, known as sequestration, has capped what we can spend on our military. And so there hasn't been a proper budget process based on threats and analysis of threats in the world we live in. Instead, we're making do with what's there. It's not just too late, as was said in that testimony. It's too little. We've underfunded every one of our services, so we've got less less than 50% less air squadrons today in our Air Force and our Navy. 60% of our fighter jets are grounded.
Yeah,
and in the Army, only
actually
3 of our brigade combat teams are capable. It's
While
amazing.
you're discussing all that, let's bring it up so people can see it in writing, because it really is staggering when you take a look at how depleted our military is and how unprepared we are. The Defense Department budget fell by more than $100 billion from 2011 to 2014. Active Army, the smallest since World War II. Air Force, now the oldest and smallest in its history.
That's right. So it means you're going to have less of things, but also you're going to be less prepared, less training, less flight hours, less days at sea. You're also going to have, as far as maintenance, less ability to make sure your aircraft are ready to go, your ships are ready to go, your soldiers are prepared with what they need, and so you don't get the training time, and you're not at the tip of the spear the way you want to. So your elite forces are taken care of. But as was said, your bench, your backup, your conventional forces don't have the training and the readiness you need, so you can't call on them at a moment's notice, and they're not prepared to fight that unpredictable war that could be on the horizon. You never get to pick the next battle you're going to have.
It's not just the financial constraints as well. Our troops have been involved in conflicts overseas for 15 years now.
Sure. Which means they're battle-hardened. They understand the nature of this enemy, and there's value in that for sure. But we've also relied on the same troops and the same equipment without modernizing, without being able to do the proper maintenance, without the proper dwell times. So as a result, you've got some weariness in the force, but even though it's determined to understand this enemy. And so you haven't had the ability to rebuild. This is what Donald Trump will have to do. Much like we're basically standing on the Reagan buildup still today after the Carter years. We're going to need a Trump buildup after the Obama years to face a very dangerous world. That's what he's up to, and it sounds like the chairman of the Armed Services Committee in the House and the Senate, Thornberry and McCain, are committed to spending upwards of $100 billion more in the next budget. That's just a stopgap, frankly.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, they're asking for $640 billion for the 2015.
Yeah, that's right. But over the last 5 or 6 years under sequestration, the defense budget has been slashed by over 20% as our demand has gone up. Yeah, as our demand has gone up, the defense budget has been slashed, and we're relying on less troops, less ships, less aircraft. So now you've got to rebuild just to meet basic demand and get on an up tempo.
That's the thing. Where does the money come from?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. The Obama administration prioritized social services over the military. You can reform things like entitlement programs and plow that into defense, as some has advocated for. But we're $20 trillion in debt. There's no doubt that's a massive problem. So you're going to have to find cuts elsewhere. You can also find efficiencies inside the Defense Department. Thankfully, Thornberry and McCain are committed to reforming the way we acquire weapons systems, which is bloated. And, Donald Trump is an expert on making sure things come in under budget and before they're due. Yeah. So if anybody can do it, it's him, with some good partners on Capitol Hill.
He has to get to work, and we have to allow him to get to work. Well, yet another reason to kind of move this along. Thank you so much, Pete. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Right about 9:30 now. We'll get the opening bell on the Wall Street in a moment here. Also, President Trump will do the honors this morning for the swearing in of Jeff Sessions. He will be the 84th AG of the United States. We expect that next hour at the White House, and we'll cover it for you. This after a bitter and racially charged battle in the Senate, topped off with Elizabeth Warren's reading of a letter by Dr. Martin Luther King's widow, a reading that was cut off by Republicans. Senator John Barrasso on that and plans for Obamacare, tax cuts, and more. Next.
The liberal left that speaks and desires for all of us to be tolerant do not want to be tolerant of anyone that disagrees with where they are coming from.
Well, two big hearings to tell you about in this hour. One underway right now. The Senate discussing the situation in Afghanistan, with many of the lawmakers questioning why the U.S. continues to pour billions into Afghan forces. We just talked about the money as the top commander for U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan takes the stand in front of Congress. This as President Trump faces some tough choices on how to beat back the resurgent Taliban. And in less than an hour, the Senate set to hold a hearing on America's relationship with Russia. A group of lawmakers are pushing a bill that could require congressional oversight of any decision to provide sanctions relief to the Kremlin. Now, this could set Congress on a collision course with the Trump administration. Imagine that. President Trump repeatedly, he's said that he would welcome better relations with Russia, but so far has not rolled back any Obama-era sanctions against Moscow. We will be monitoring all of these situations throughout the morning.
It's a lot to watch.
Yes.
Now to another Fox News alert now. Incoming AG Jeff Sessions set to be sworn in about an hour from now. And the president's pick for HHS Secretary Tom Price may not be far behind. He's expected to get a full vote in the Senate sometime tonight or early tomorrow. But both men met intense resistance from Democrats, including delays repeatedly. Senator Sessions saying that the Senate needs to tone down the rhetoric to get the people's work accomplished. He said this last night.
I'm fairly firm, I got to say, in my convictions, but that doesn't mean that all of us have to agree on the same thing. We need latitude in our relationships. And so let's agree on what we can agree on. Integrating people who disagree with us, I think, is not a healthy trend for our body.
Let's talk about the health of that body. Wyoming Senator John Barrasso chairs the Senate Republican Policy Committee with me now. Senator, good morning to you.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Things going to settle down there or not?
Well, it is interesting to see the Democrats who are still in denial over the fact that Donald Trump is president and has nominated an all-star team for a cabinet. They continue to try to slow it down. We're going to confirm Tom Price later today. We did Jeff Sessions, Betsy DeVos. We're continuing to get members of the cabinet confirmed as the Democrats continue to try to obstruct and slow things down.
Elizabeth Warren tweeted the following, and you know the back and forth that has involved her throughout the week here. If Jeff Sessions makes even the tiniest attempt to bring his racism, sexism, and bigotry into the Justice Department, he'll hear from all of us. Here's another one. And you better believe every senator who voted to put Jeff Sessions' radical hatred into the Justice Department will hear from all of us, too. What do you think of that?
Well, I'll tell you, I was proud to vote for Jeff Sessions. I've worked with him in the Senate for 10 years. He is an incredibly kind man, a man who cares about the rule of law. He's going to do an outstanding job as Attorney General of the United States. So, you know, Elizabeth Warren and what happened on the floor of the Senate, very interesting because look, she is a professor at Harvard Law School. She knew exactly what she was doing. Now she's the voice and the face of the Democrat Party, which to me is a very liberal voice and face coming out of Harvard, an Eastern elite. That's not where this country is going in terms of what the American people are concerned about, which is jobs, the economy, and national security.
Well, let's talk about Republicans now, shall we? Sure. Matt Drudge tweeted this yesterday. White House eyeing executive order targeting conflict minerals rule. Meanwhile, is Obamacare penalty tax still in place? Another one. Republican Party should be sued for fraud. No discussion of tax cuts now, just lots of crazy. Back to basics, guys. Where are we now in the tax cuts? Is there an active process to move that forward? And if there is, what's the status today, Senator?
Well, we actually had a meeting in our steering committee yesterday to discuss the whole issue of tax reform, which is necessary in this country to get the economy going forward. The continuing on the promises that we have made as Republicans in terms of tax reform, in terms of getting rid of the abusive regulations that have come out of the Obama administration, in terms of working toward infrastructure and repealing and replacing the damage that's been done by the Obama health care law. We're continuing step by step in each of those ways, Bill.
Is it slower than a President Trump would expect?
Well, Donald Trump is a man of action. We continue to see that coming out of the White House, and we continue to see the Democrats in the Senate trying to slow down everything, including picking fights and battles they will not win, and they know it. I would think it has to be disheartening for them to continue to go after one cabinet nominee after another, and we continue to approve them. They have delayed it to the point that the last time a president this far into a term has had so few cabinet members was when George Washington became president of the United States.
I know that's been an issue, but on the taxes, you're saying it's going to get done?
This year, absolutely. We continue to work on tax reform. You need to find ways to lower the rates, stimulate business, get the economy moving in a way that's been slowed down terribly under the Obama administration. That's turning around.
All right, well, watch taxes for this year, as you just stated. On Obamacare, Senator Bob Corker was quoted as saying that there's not a cohesive idea behind any one plan, and I think that's evident. When does that change, Senator?
Well, we continue to have meetings regularly. As a matter of fact, did yesterday. We're meeting with insurance commissioners from around the states. Different states are coming in, holding hearings. We have a blueprint, a working document on ways to actually help try to deal with the terrible problems of the Obama health care law. Bill, there are two reports out this week. One is the people that have signed up are sicker, which means more expensive. That's one of the things driving costs up. And the other is that fewer people signed up for Obamacare this year than last year because they know it's not a good deal for them personally. So there are things that are going to have to change and things that won't change. Things that won't change, people under 26 will be able to stay on their parents' plan.
And we've talked about
for people with pre-existing conditions, they'll be protected.
Can you say with the same conviction that that will happen this year, as you just stated on taxes?
Well, I am convinced that it will. I continue to work with others on that, working with the chairman of the different committees, the House and the Senate. We're continuing to work. We are committed to long-term solutions. Health care needs to be fixed. Obamacare can't be fixed. People have suffered enough. We want to provide relief. We want to help those people repair the damage that's been done to them and their lives. That's my long-term commitment as a doctor and a senator.
Okay, and that conversation will continue then. We'll try and figure out a schedule when appropriate. Senator, thank you for your time. John Barraza, the Republican from Wyoming there on the Hill. Thank you. 20 minutes now before the hour. Heather?
Well, there's an alarming new report about the National Refugee Database, the system riddled with vulnerabilities for years, apparently. So how easy would it be for hackers to break into it?
Also, as we await the ruling out of San Francisco, the White House insisting the president has the law on his side. And, well, he's hitting back at critics for making this a political fight, as he says.
Let's be very clear about this fact. No alien in a foreign land has a right to demand entry into the United States of America. They can never have such a right. Rights adhere to people living inside the United States of America.
So, President Trump now meeting with top minds across the country and the airline industry at the White House. That meeting taking place now. We're awaiting video. We'll get a video play out in a moment. When that happens, we'll show it to you and we'll get some comments, as we tend to.
Yes, I'm sure someone will have something to say about that, for sure.
So stay tuned now, 15 minutes before the hour.
It is extremely dishonest, and it is frankly contemptible the way that false statements have been made about the president's lawful, necessary, and fully constitutional action. This is the apex of presidential power, delegated to the president by Congress and by the Constitution to suspend the entry of aliens into the United States.
That is White House Policy Director Stephen Miller insisting that President Trump's temporary travel ban is completely constitutional, slamming the media for framing this as a political fight. Doug Schoen is a former advisor to President Bill Clinton and a Fox News contributor, and Alex Conant was communications director for Senator Marco Rubio's presidential campaign. Thank you both for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
Doug, I'll start with you. Is the media being unfair?
No, I think they're raising reasonable questions about a controversial measure that was rolled out with a lot of problems, perhaps too quickly, and it's before the courts. And I think what we do in this country is we have co-equal branches: the legislative branch, the judiciary, and the presidency. And I think what Supreme Court Justice Designate Gorsuch said is exactly right. It's dismaying that the president has seen fit to want to attack the judiciary. So I'm not against robust debate, but I think it's best done in the courts, both the appellate court and ultimately, I think in this case, the Supreme Court.
But Alex, is the media spending too much time involved in the controversy of all of it? I mean, the White House released this list. It had 78 attacks listed on it. And then just yesterday, they released the some of refugees who were on some of those banned countries as well, from those banned countries.
Well, my question would be, why did the White House wait a week and a half after it put out the executive order before it started explaining the rationale for the executive order? It's not just the media that's been very critical of the order. It's also Congress, Republicans in Congress, and obviously the court system, where it has not fared, the executive order has not fared very well to date. I would say to anyone at the White House, especially to Stephen Miller, who I have a lot of respect for, but I would say to him, if he doesn't like the way that this has been rolled out, he should look at himself in the mirror, because the White House botched the rollout of this executive order from the first moment, and now it's playing catch-up.
They've acknowledged that. They've acknowledged that they botched the rollout, and in fact, the Defense Secretary took full responsibility for it. So why are we still on the rollout when it's already been rolled out?
Well, we're talking about the rollout because the White House is complaining about how the executive order is being portrayed. And the reason it's been portrayed so poorly is because when they rolled it out, members of Congress didn't know anything about it. The Justice Department was not ready to defend it in court, and therefore it lost its first couple of court appearances. And then you saw these big protests because there was so much confusion about what is in the executive order. I think communications is very important.
And that is a good point. That's a good point, Doug. There was a lot of coverage of all of the protests, but a lot of people, in fact, the majority of people in some of the most recent polls agree with the temporary immigration ban.
That's right. And Alex couldn't be more correct. The order, when initially rolled out, was not only not communicated, it was overbroad. When you do these kind of things, you make them as narrow as possible. And the fact that visa holders or green card holders were put on the list is an arguable overreach. And look, the left is more mobilized on this than the right. You're absolutely right, Heather, about the polls, but there's also intensity, and that's going against the administration.
But when the White House sends out these lists, and what I was trying to say earlier, that they release this list of terror arrests from the banned countries, but yet that's not getting a lot of coverage.
Again, Alex is right. This was bad communication. Had it come with the initial order, had the initial order been more precise and less overbroad, we would be in a very different situation. The president could have done an Oval Office address. He could have mobilized Republicans. None of it was done. The result is a measure that is now in peril and has a good chance of being struck down.
Alex, that's a good question. Should the president come out and make some sort of statement and let the public know why this is a case for national security?
Look, executive orders are only as good as the president's ability to implement them. Remember, in President Obama's first week in office, he signed an order to close Gitmo within a year. 8 years later, it's still open because the courts and Congress and the public fought him on it. President Trump can continue to sign executive orders, but they will only be good if he can get the support of Congress and the Congress, judges, and the American people. So absolutely, when he signs these orders, he needs to explain why he is signing them, and he needs to rally political support for them, or else they will never be implemented.
Yeah, and the media will continue to focus on all of it. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you.
If you look outside, you know winter's packing a punch, affecting a lot of people, too. Felt like spring just yesterday, didn't it? Whole different story today. Millions in the path of a storm that will make that commute miserable. So how long will it last? And who's next?